The world of Hollywood was shaken in December 2025 when news emerged that Rob Reiner, the celebrated director of films like When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride, and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, had tragically passed away in their Brentwood home. For many, this news came as a sudden shock. But for those closest to them, including lifelong friend Billy Crystal, there were signs that something had been quietly troubling the family for years. Just a few weeks before the tragedy, on November 30th, 2025, Rob had reached out to Billy, asking him to come over to discuss something that was weighing heavily on his mind. This phone call was unlike any other. It was not about movies, work, or shared jokes, but about a deeply personal matter that Rob could no longer keep to himself. When Billy arrived at the Reiner home, he noticed immediately that something was off. Rob, who usually carried himself in a neat, composed appearance, looked tired, his shirt slightly wrinkled, sleeves rolled higher than usual, and his hair less cared for than normal. These subtle details, often unnoticed by casual visitors, spoke volumes to someone like Billy, who had known Rob for decades. The director's grip when shaking hands was weaker, signaling the strain he was under, and the usual liveliness of the Reiner home was absent. The television was off. No music played, and Rob, though pouring water into a glass, did not drink, his eyes continually drifting toward the hallway as if preoccupied with events elsewhere in the house. These minor details, though seemingly ordinary, created a sense of unease that Billy could not ignore. They were the physical manifestations of a tension Rob had been carrying in silence for years. Rob began to speak carefully, revealing the internal struggles within his family, particularly concerning his son, Nick Reiner. He spoke of Nick's recent relapse, behavioral changes, and volatility that had left Rob and Michelle exhausted and worried. For Rob, these moments of tension were not new, but he had reached a point where he could no longer predict his son's reactions, a realization that filled him with fear and helplessness. He confessed that he worried about pushing Nick away, that doing so might trigger consequences he could not control. Billy, listening intently, realized the gravity of the situation and responded with the care of a friend who understood both the stakes and the delicate nature of family bonds. He encouraged Rob to establish boundaries for the safety of everyone in the household, emphasizing that love and patience, while important, were not enough to manage the dangers that could arise from unchecked instability. This conversation, intimate and heavy with unspoken fears, was later recalled by Billy as one of the most unsettling moments he had ever experienced with Rob. The sense of unease lingered with him long after leaving the house, marking the beginning of a series of events that would ultimately lead to tragedy. In this private exchange, Billy Crystal witnessed the quiet burden Rob had carried for years, a mixture of love, responsibility, and fear that few outside the inner circle could understand. These warnings, subtle but clear, would later weigh heavily on Billy, as the events that followed unfolded in ways that made him question what could have been done to prevent the unimaginable loss of two beloved friends. The importance of this moment lies not only in the foresight it provided, but also in the profound emotional connection that allowed Billy to witness, in real time, the silent struggles of a man whose life had been dedicated to storytelling, both on screen and within his family. Through this, the stage was set for understanding the complexity of the Reiner household, the fragility of human relationships, and the tragic series of events that would ultimately claim the lives of Rob and Michelle Reiner. Following that November afternoon visit, Billy Crystal could not stop thinking about the details Rob had shared. The quiet tension he had sensed in the Reiner home was not limited to a single incident. It reflected years of unresolved family struggles that had quietly escalated over time. Rob spoke of Nick Reiner, his only son, with a mixture of love, concern, and exhaustion. According to Rob, Nick had battled addiction and emotional instability for most of his adult life, with periods of apparent recovery often followed by relapses that shook the entire family. The most recent relapse, occurring in early November, had left Nick irritable, reactive, and unpredictable. Small disagreements quickly escalated into arguments, and at times, Michelle had to leave the room to avoid confrontations that could spiral out of control. Rob admitted to Billy that he had reached a point where he could no longer predict how Nick might behave, even within the familiar safety of the home. One incident, just a week before Thanksgiving, had particularly shaken him. A heated argument erupted in the kitchen over money and treatment plans. leaving Rob with a chilling awareness that the situation had the potential to escalate beyond his control. Although he did not recount the exact words exchanged, the memory of the confrontation was enough to make him realize that the stability of the household was fragile. Throughout the conversation, Billy noticed Rob's physical cues. His tense posture, the repeated interlacing of his fingers, and the way he rubbed his forehead as if trying to ward off a headache caused by stress. These gestures were subtle, but they revealed a man weighed down by years of worry, someone attempting to hold together a family under strain. Rob explained that he was trying to maintain closeness with Nick, believing that parental presence and support might help stabilize him. However, beneath this hope was a constant undercurrent of fear that a single misstep could trigger events beyond anyone's control. Billy listened as Rob admitted that he felt trapped between love for his son and the need to protect himself and Michelle. In his voice, Billy detected exhaustion, a deep weariness that was both emotional and physical. It was clear that Rob had carried the weight of these struggles privately for a long time, never fully sharing them with the outside world. The afternoon conversation also revealed Rob's complex understanding of family dynamics. He knew that confrontation without care could worsen the situation, yet he feared that doing nothing might be equally dangerous. He acknowledged to Billy that establishing boundaries was necessary, but the thought of enforcing them filled him with anxiety because of the potential consequences for Nick. This tension, Rob confessed, had been building for decades, but only now did he feel its full intensity. He spoke slowly, choosing words with care, and Billy could sense the internal conflict between a father's instinct to protect and a man's desire to remain compassionate and patient. In that room, surrounded by familiar furniture and memories of happier times, Rob laid bare the emotional struggle he'd endured silently for years. Billy, as a close friend and witness to these confessions, understood the gravity of what was being revealed. The quiet, restrained way in which Rob spoke contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions he must have been feeling internally. From that conversation, it became clear to Billy that the Reiner household was not just dealing with ordinary family issues, but with challenges that required constant vigilance and careful management. These struggles were compounded by Nick's repeated patterns of instability, the unpredictability of his reactions, and the long history of previous crises. Every word Rob shared painted a picture of family walking a delicate line between love, hope, and fear, a balance that could be disrupted at any moment. Billy left the house that evening carrying a sense of foreboding, a feeling that the warning signs were significant and that the delicate equilibrium in the Reiner home was at risk of being broken. He knew that Rob's fears were not imagined, but the culmination of real, ongoing issues that had quietly escalated over time. And although nothing in that moment suggested the tragic events to come, the conversation planted seeds of unease that Billy would carry with him, replaying every detail, every gesture, and every word as he tried to understand the fragile dynamics at play within one of Hollywood's most admired families. The weight of that knowledge, mixed with friendship and love, would later shape how Billy viewed the tragedy, and his reflections would offer insight into the unseen struggles that often exist behind even the most successful and respected lives. I end the days following that November conversation. Billy Crystal could not shake the unease that had settled in his mind. Every detail Rob had shared replayed in his thoughts. The tense argument in the kitchen, Nick's unpredictable moods, the quiet moments of exhaustion in Rob's voice, and the subtle physical cues that signaled stress. The weeks between that visit and the tragedy became a period of heightened awareness for Billy, who kept returning mentally to the warnings Rob had offered. He remembered how Rob had emphasized that, despite his love for his son, he could no longer accurately gauge Nick's reactions during moments of intense stress. Each day, the tension within the family, though invisible to outsiders, seemed to grow, and Billy feared that the balance Rob had tried so hard to maintain could collapse at any moment. As Thanksgiving approached, Rob and Michelle prepared for family gatherings, attempting to keep routines as normal as possible, but the underlying strain was impossible to hide completely. Billy later recounted that in his conversations with close friends, he remembered Rob expressing both hope and anxiety. Hope that love and presence could stabilize Nick, and anxiety that the situation could escalate beyond anyone's control. During the holiday season, the pressure increased as family gatherings and social events added more variables to an already delicate situation. One particularly troubling event occurred during a Christmas gathering hosted by Conan O'Brien, where Nick's behavior was noticeably erratic. Several attendees observe him acting differently than usual, more agitated, less controlled, and at times emotionally distant. For Billy, learning about this behavior weeks later confirmed the fears Rob had shared during their private conversation. He understood that these warning signs were part of a larger pattern, one that had repeatedly surfaced over the years without resolution. Billy also reflected on Rob's coping strategies, the ways he had tried to maintain normalcy while quietly managing intense family pressures. Rob had poured himself into work, continued directing films, and supported charitable causes, yet the emotional weight at home remained heavy. Billy realized that Rob's decision to confide in him was not casual. It reflected the depth of trust between them and the seriousness of the issues at hand. The director had chosen to share these concerns with someone who could listen and understand, someone who had known him for decades and whose perspective he valued. Yet, even with this conversation, the sense of unease persisted for Billy, as he sensed the fragility of the situation could lead to consequences beyond anyone's ability to prevent. The days leading up to December 14th, 2025, were therefore filled with a mixture of normal holiday activity and underlying tension within the Reiner home. Neighbors and casual acquaintances noticed little, but those close to the family understood that a delicate balance was being maintained. Every decision, every interaction, every moment of silence carried weight, and Rob bore that responsibility with remarkable restraint. Billy, reflecting back, understood that the private knowledge of a friend's struggle could be both a blessing and a burden. It allowed him to witness the depth of Rob's love and dedication, but it also left him carrying the heavy weight of foresight, the uneasy feeling that tragedy might be unavoidable. In the end, the combination of long-standing family tensions, Nick's ongoing struggles, and the natural stresses of the holiday season created conditions that were perilous, even in a household accustomed to resilience and love. Billy would later describe this period as a series of subtle warnings, small moments and behaviors that individually might have seemed minor, but collectively formed a chain of events that pointed to potential for disaster. He replayed every conversation, every detail, and every gesture in his mind, wondering what could have been done differently. This period serves as a reminder that even in lives filled with privilege, success, and acclaim, hidden struggles can escalate quietly and powerfully, and that the love and loyalty of friends often coexist with feelings of helplessness in the face of circumstances beyond their control. For Billy, those days were filled with reflection, worry, and anticipation of outcomes he could neither prevent nor fully comprehend, setting the stage for the tragedy that would later shake the world and forever change his life. December 14th, 2025, began like any other day on the surface, but for the Reiner family, it would soon become a moment that changed everything. From the outside, neighbors and friends saw a quiet morning in the Brentwood neighborhood, where the Reiners had lived for decades, hosting gatherings and creating countless memories within the walls of their home. Yet, inside, tensions quietly simmered, and the delicate equilibrium that Rob had worked so hard to maintain was unraveling. Billy Crystal, still replaying their private conversation from weeks earlier, could not help but feel a sense of foreboding when he learned later that the tragedy had occurred. According to accounts he received, the initial discovery of Rob and Michelle's bodies was made by someone outside the immediate family, who, noticing a lack of response, knocked repeatedly at the door. The extended silence in a house that had always been active with movement, laughter, and conversation immediately struck Billy as highly unusual. He remembered how Rob had described similar moments of tension in the past, when the home would fall silent not because of calm, but because emotions had become too heavy, too intense, to be expressed. The scene that awaited those who entered the house confirmed these fears. The environment was familiar in its arrangement, yet profoundly unsettling, because it bore the marks of a situation that had escalated internally rather than from external sources. Rooms were largely undisturbed, suggesting that whatever had occurred unfolded in an intimate, everyday setting, precisely as Rob had described his fears about potential escalations with Nick. The timing of discovery added to the unsettling nature of the incident. Nick Reiner, the person Rob had worried about most, was notably absent from the home, having been detained later that evening several miles away. Billy's mind immediately drew connections between Nick's absence and Rob's repeated warnings about his son's unpredictable behavior. The chain of events that led to this moment now appeared tragically coherent, as though the warnings had been silently building toward a climax that no one could stop. Observers reported the reactions of those who first entered the home, particularly Romy, who panicked upon seeing her father, and Michelle, whose location in the house was discovered later. To Billy, these reactions underscored the reality of what Rob had long feared. Moments of emotional intensity within the family had the potential to become overwhelming, leaving even those closest unable to intervene in time. In the immediate aftermath, Billy reflected on everything he had witnessed during his private visit weeks earlier. The weariness in Rob's eyes, his careful words, the tension in his hands, and the fear he carried for the future of his family. These recollections became hauntingly vivid, reinforcing the sense that the tragedy was a result of long-standing, unresolved issues rather than a random occurrence. The impact on Billy was profound. He described a mixture of grief, guilt, and helplessness that was almost physical in its intensity. The realization that the warnings he had heard and tried to act upon had not been enough to prevent disaster created an emotional burden that weighed heavily on him for weeks afterward. Even among the bustle of media reports and legal proceedings, Billy's private memories of Rob and Michelle, their warmth, their humor, their shared life, were contrasted sharply with the grim details of the day, intensifying his sense of loss. For him, the tragedy was not only about the deaths of two beloved friends, but also about the collapse of a world he had long considered stable. It highlighted the fragility of life, the unpredictability of human behavior, and the invisible struggles that can exist even within homes that seem secure and loving. As he processed these events, Billy's attention remained on understanding the sequence of events and the subtle signs he had observed months earlier, trying to reconcile his memories of Rob's warnings with the reality that had unfolded. That day, for Billy, marked the painful intersection of friendship, foresight, and the limits of human control, leaving him to grapple with emotions that were as intense and complex as the lives of the people he had lost. Following the tragic events in Brentwood, the focus quickly shifted to the legal proceedings surrounding Nick Reiner, whose absence from the home at the time of discovery immediately drew attention. According to reports that Billy Crystal later received, Nick had been located more than 20 kilometers away, near the University of Southern California, and was detained shortly afterward. The distance and circumstances suggested to Billy that Nick may have been disoriented, panicked, or acting impulsively, exactly as Rob had described his son's behavior during previous crises. The legal response was swift. Nick faced 2 counts of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances due to the deaths of both Rob and Michelle Reiner. He was held without bail, awaiting trial, and the formal charges reflected the severity and complexity of the incident. While the courts moved to address the legal aspects, Billy found himself absorbed in a different type of process, one of reflection, grief, and attempt to reconcile the events with his own experiences. He revisited every detail from his private conversation with Rob, every sign of tension he had observed in the Reiner household, and every subtle gesture that had hinted at the deep strain within the family. The knowledge that had been present during a crucial moment, a moment when Rob confided fears about his son and the fragile balance of family life, weighed heavily on him. Billy admitted to close friends that he struggled with feelings of guilt, questioning whether he could have done more to prevent the tragedy. Could he have spoken more forcefully? Arranged another meeting? Alerted someone else? These questions haunted him, not because he had failed as a friend, but because the intimacy of his knowledge brought a painful awareness of what was lost and what could not be undone. Beyond his personal grief, Billy also reflected on the broader pattern of family tension that Rob had described. He thought about the years of struggle with Nick's addiction, the relapses, the emotional volatility, and the careful attempts to maintain normalcy within the home. In Billy's mind, these details formed a chain that led inevitably toward a tragic outcome, and he could see, with painful clarity, how the warning signs had been present all along. He described moments of private mourning in which he would replay conversations, the tired look in Rob's eyes, and the subtle physical cues that had suggested emotional strain. Each memory carried both warmth and sadness. Warmth from decades of friendship, collaboration, and shared laughter. Sadness from the realization that even deep understanding and loyalty could not prevent the unfolding disaster. Billy's reflections extended beyond the personal to a meditation on human vulnerability, the limits of foresight, and the fragility of family bonds under pressure. He understood that love and intention, even when constant and unwavering, cannot always avert crises, particularly when the underlying issues are deeply entrenched and emotionally complex. During this period, he also considered the public and private dimensions of grief. While Nick's legal situation unfolded in courts and media reports, Billy experienced a private, intensely personal mourning process, one in which the memories of Rob and Michelle were inseparable from his feelings of helplessness and responsibility. Friends noted that he withdrew from social events, avoided public appearances, and spent long hours reflecting quietly at home, revisiting old messages, photographs, and shared memories. Through it all, Billy's admiration for Rob's resilience and dedication persisted. Despite decades of challenges, Rob had remained committed to his family, to his son, and to the people around him. Billy recognized that this commitment had shaped the bond between them, and that part of his grief stemmed from witnessing a man so devoted to love and family ultimately caught in circumstances beyond his control. This period of reflection, grief, and cautious observation allowed Billy to contextualize the tragedy not merely as a shocking event, but as a culmination of years of unseen struggle, complex emotions, and fragile human connections. For him, understanding the sequence of events, from private warnings to public consequences, became essential in reconciling with both the past and the ongoing legal and emotional ramifications of the Reiner family tragedy. It was a time of intense sorrow, learning, and contemplation, marking a new chapter in Billy's life where friendship, memory, and the harsh realities of human vulnerability intertwined in ways he had never before experienced. In the weeks that followed the tragedy, Billy Crystal's mourning became both deeply private and symbolically public, as he struggled to reconcile the loss of Rob and Michelle Reiner with the decades of shared friendship and collaboration. Those close to him observed that he had withdrawn almost completely from social life, skipping routine gatherings, avoiding familiar restaurants, and limiting contact with colleagues. He spent long hours reflecting in solitude, revisiting his final conversation with Rob in Brentwood, examining every word, gesture, and expression for clues he might have missed. Each recollection carried both warmth and piercing sorrow. The tired look in Rob's eyes, the subtle signs of concern over Nick, the shared laughter and intimate stories exchanged over years of trust. Yet alongside grief, Billy felt a sense of responsibility to honor the lives and legacy of his friends. This motivation culminated in a carefully crafted joint tribute, a statement signed by himself, his wife Janice Crystal, and Rob Reiner's closest friends and longtime collaborators, including prominent figures in Hollywood, such as Albert Brooks, Martin Short, Larry David, Mark Shaman, and Barry Levinson. The statement served multiple purposes. It was a public acknowledgement of the loss, a celebration of Rob and Michelle's lives, and a way to preserve the memory of their impact on both the personal and professional lives of those around them. In crafting this tribute, Billy's words reflected decades of intimacy with the Reiners, his respect for Rob's storytelling, and his admiration for Michelle's unwavering support and dedication to family and social causes. He described Rob as a masterful director and storyteller, capable of moving effortlessly between genres, balancing comedy with drama, and guiding actors to deliver authentic performances, all while creating an environment of collaboration rather than command. But beyond professional accomplishments, Billy emphasized the personal qualities that had made Rob a trusted friend and indispensable companion through life's highs and lows. The tribute highlighted the shared values, humor, and emotional depth that formed the foundation of their enduring friendship. It recounted stories from the early days of their collaboration on All in the Family, when they first recognized a rare understanding of one another, a connection rooted not in fame or ambition, but in a shared approach to life and storytelling. Billy reflected on how that bond deepened over decades, encompassing professional collaboration, mutual guidance, personal celebrations, and shared grief. Michelle's role in this dynamic was also central. She was remembered not only as a loving partner and mother, but as a strong, dedicated individual whose influence had shaped the family's life and who had been a constant presence alongside Rob in both public and private spheres. The joint statement conveyed the profound sense of loss experienced by those who knew the couple intimately, as well as the enduring impact of their lives on the wider community. It was meant to honor both their professional achievements and their personal virtues, presenting a balanced picture of their contributions to art, family, and society. For Billy, signing the statement and seeing it released publicly was an emotional act of closure and remembrance. It allowed him to channel the intensity of private grief into a formal acknowledgement of friendship and legacy, preserving Rob and Michelle's memory in the public record while simultaneously processing his own loss. The act of speaking for their circle of friends reinforced the enduring bonds that connected them over decades and highlighted the profound influence the Reiners had on the lives of those around them. In doing so, Billy Crystal demonstrated that grief can be both intensely personal and publicly meaningful, serving as a bridge between private mourning and collective memory. The tribute became a testament to love, loyalty, and the responsibility felt by those left behind to honor and preserve the stories of friends who shaped their lives. Through this act, Billy not only paid homage to Rob and Michelle, but also provided a framework for understanding the depth of their relationships, the fragility of life, and the ways in which shared history and enduring bonds can offer both solace and perspective in the face of unimaginable loss. The statement was widely circulated, read by friends, colleagues, and fans, and it set the tone for a period of reflection, remembrance, and public mourning that acknowledged the personal and cultural significance of the Reiners' lives. After releasing the joint tribute, Billy Crystal's grief did not lessen. Instead, it entered a quieter, more reflective phase, where he began to process the loss of Rob and Michelle Reiner in deeply personal ways. In private conversations with close friends and family, he admitted that the public tribute was only the first step in confronting the reality of their deaths. Each day, he wrestled with memories of Rob's humor, wisdom, and creative brilliance, alongside the warm support and kindness of Michelle. Billy described how these recollections would appear unbidden during ordinary moments. While walking through the city, watching a film, or hearing a familiar song, he would suddenly recall a shared laugh, an insight Rob had offered, or a conversation about life's complexities. These flashes of memory brought both comfort and profound sadness, reminding him that the people who had shaped so much of his life were gone. Friends noted that Billy's mourning involved long periods of solitude, where he would sit quietly, reflecting on the decade of friendship and the countless small moments that had defined his relationship with the Reiners. He revisited old letters, phone messages, and photographs, attempting to hold on to the intimacy of a shared history, while confronting the painful awareness that no new memories could be created with them. The intensity of these reflections often left him physically and emotionally drained. Yet Billy found that this immersion in memory was also a way of honoring Rob and Michelle, keeping their presence alive in the contours of his daily life. He spoke privately about the difficulty of reconciling grief with the practicalities of living. The sudden absence of trusted companions altered routines, disrupted a sense of normalcy, and left a void that could not be filled. Billy described feeling both a witness to and participant in the complex legacy left behind by the Reiners, their creative achievements, their family struggles, and the personal bonds that had shaped so many lives. At the same time, he grappled with guilt, questioning whether he could have acted differently in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, despite knowing that he had already offered warnings and support during private conversations. This sense of responsibility was intertwined with love and respect, as he understood that Rob had always acted with care and courage in trying to protect his family, particularly his son Nick, whose unpredictable behavior had been a source of worry for many years. Billy's reflections also extended to the broader lessons of human vulnerability and familial complexity. He considered how even the most loving and attentive parents can face situations that spiral beyond their control, and how friendship can provide support, but cannot always alter outcomes determined by circumstances and individual choices. In this period of mourning, Billy began to explore ways to channel his grief into something meaningful, seeking comfort in continuing to celebrate Rob and Michelle's lives through stories, shared memories, and engaging with projects that honored their work. He found that speaking to close friends, writing reflections, and revisiting films they created together provided a sense of connection that transcended the finality of death. Moreover, Billy started to recognize the ways in which grief could coexist with gratitude for decades of shared experiences, for the opportunity to collaborate with someone as talented and principled as Rob, and for the enduring impact that both Rob and Michelle had on the world around them. This awareness gradually shaped a more nuanced understanding of loss, one in which sorrow and appreciation were intertwined, allowing Billy to navigate the emotional aftermath with honesty, compassion, and a commitment to remembering his friends authentically. Over time, he also began to acknowledge the importance of self-care, of allowing himself to feel pain without being consumed by it, and of embracing the ways in which his own resilience could honor the lives and values of the Reiners. Through this process, Billy Crystal's mourning became a journey not only of remembrance, but also of personal growth, reflection, and an ongoing dialogue with the memories of two people whose presence had profoundly shaped the course of his life. The experience highlighted the transformative power of friendship, the fragility of human life, and the enduring significance of maintaining emotional connections, even in the face of loss that feels insurmountable. As the weeks and months passed after the tragic events in Brentwood, the focus for Billy Crystal and others close to the Reiners gradually shifted from the immediate shock of loss to a deeper contemplation of their enduring legacy.